Okay, today we're going to be speaking with Erika Georget. She's the Managing Director of ERIDIA. Erika will give us a little bit more info about ERIDIA in a second, but in short, the company offers a range of services from feasibility studies to industrial scale plant design and construction with a focus on fermentation and cellular agriculture. Erika, welcome to Protein Production Technology International.
Hi, Nick.
Hello. Could you please briefly explain what ERIDIA is, what it does, and which industries it serves?
Certainly, and thank you for having me here today with you. You've wrapped it in a nutshell very well, but maybe going in a few more details about what ERIDIA is and what we do. So we're a 2-year-old company now, a joint venture that was established from Bühler and Zeta, so two established player into the food and biopharmaceutical sector. And we were set up to act as an enabler for companies looking to scale, which are leveraging fermentation, be it biomass, or precision fermentation, or, as you've mentioned, cell ag, looking, of course, at mammalian cell culture, but also plant cell cultures that comes forward more and more. Primarily focused on the food and feed industry, but gradually also it's enlarging our activities in other industries like chemical industry, where we see that there are similar challenges and opportunities associated to these new means of production that fermentation or cell culture may be. In terms of what we do, I mean, we follow quite holistic support for companies that are looking to scale in these industries. That means, as you said, we start from the very early stage. You mentioned feasibility study. We also go a couple of steps even back for companies that are still at the lab scale or that may be looking to get out of the lab. We talk more here about engineering, consultancy, and guidance. So how do we help these companies think about scaling very early on and embed this into their R&D work? Also realization of techno-economical assessments, so TEAs that we hear a lot about at the moment. And then, of course, going into the scale-up, you've mentioned, of course, some of the key elements here around engineering. Scale-up is a long process in itself with many steps. So we're supporting the early stages there of scale-up, defining, of course, for concept design or early designs, feasibility studies, what the CapEx, OpEx, timeline, and other key metrics will be for the companies we're engaging with. And this is very precious then for their investors, for their boards, to decide how they proceed with these projects for scale-up. And of course, beyond that, once all the stakeholders are aligned and the companies are ready to move forward, supporting with the execution along the line of engineering and then management of procurement and construction for these assets. So supporting really all the way to the commissioning and site startup. Talking here about new projects, new builds. But if we go into, let's say, companies that are looking to go for asset-light strategy, we can also help integrating their process into existing assets, for instance.
Uh-huh.
So that's in a nutshell. And I would say maybe one last point to mention about us that's quite important is, although we are a joint venture, of course, of two established players with equipment manufacturing activities, we act as an integrator. So that means we work with a very broad range of suppliers here and potential process solutions that are made available to our customers. So we try really early on to focus on the optimization of the process rather than binding our customers to select a portfolio, to make sure we get the best solutions for them before they go into the scale-up journey.
Now, that partnership between Bühler and Zeta is a unique combination of expertise. Could you possibly elaborate on how these two distinct strengths have been instrumental in your success in that 2 or so years that you've been around?
Absolutely. I think that's maybe also something that is quite special about ERIDIA, is that as a joint venture, we bring together really two worlds that are, in fact, really in that sense, very complementary. So Bühler coming more from the process engineering and equipment manufacturing for the food and feed industry, used to operate, of course, in a market that is the target market for many of our customers, while Zeta coming more from the biopharmaceutical and biotech sector, having this expertise on scaling upstream process, cell culture in particular, fermentation processes, brings more this upstream know-how. And at ERIDIA, we integrate essentially these two knowledge base, and that's that's a great opportunity for our customers to really access over 160 years of know-how in these industries. What we do with this is then, of course, it's not just a matter of 1 + 1 = 2. It's really looking at how do we integrate this knowledge, and then from the whiteboard again, reflect on the different knowledge blocks and expertise blocks we have, and how do we combine them the most effectively to design fit-for-purpose solution for this industry. So which is at the intersection between biotech and food tech. And looking at that, of course, it's not saying that there is no need for innovation. There is certainly a lot of innovation requirements, but we really like to think in integration, upstream processing, downstream processing together, and work with our customers on defining the most effective integrated solutions for them at scales. Mm-hmm. So one of the key changes, maybe if you're going to jump in, but I just want to say maybe one of the key points that I think we evolved on from there since the last 2 years of being in the market is that initially a lot of our customers were focused solely on the upstream, and we had that very strong focus on the market on how do we produce biomass. Meanwhile, we really pushed the ball, I would say, on the other side, looking at what are the market requirements of our customers, what are the industry requirements. And this is where we can leverage, of course, the downstream expertise we also have, and focus on designing suitable downstream, delivering the right requirements for their markets, and from there on, going backward, defining what are the best upstream strategy and integration to deliver this finished product. The holistic approach is really the added value of the joint venture, that we can look from end to end, technically, but also market-wise, at how to best support our customers.
Now, you mentioned there, Erika, that you're supplier agnostic. You're not just using equipment from Bühler and Zito. I mean, what specific technologies or processes set you apart from competitors in the market?
I mean, that's I would argue that's not necessarily a specific technology. Obviously, we have access to our parent company's portfolio, and there are some very interesting technologies in these portfolios that may be relevant for our customers, which we're always happy to introduce them to. However, I think the key value for our customers is the fact that we continuously screen the market for novel technologies, also for novel solutions. We know right now, I mean, I think that's well established, that there is not yet a perfect solution between, or be it in cell ag or also in precision fermentation. There's still a lot of work to be done to optimize process and costs. And there are a lot of players out there that are designing novel technical approaches. And we are actually engaging with a number of those to see how we can help integrate these and make these solutions available to our customers. So that's also a shout out for us to say, if there are technology providers out there with innovative solutions that are very much focused on, for instance, single unit operation, we can be a partner for them to integrate this as soon as it's demonstrated and help the commercialization with the right market segment. So it's not so much into the uniqueness of a single element of the portfolio, rather than in our ability to tap into the diversity of what the market has to offer, and that we are actively driving that.
Who are ERIDIA's primary clients, and how do you tailor your offerings to meet their specific needs? Because a customer in cell ag is very different to a customer in fermentation, for instance.
Absolutely. So, I mean, you've mentioned, you can define our customers in different ways. You've mentioned cell ag from fermentation is one aspect. We work also with companies of different backgrounds, so startups, corporates, also investors who are looking to get support on tech due diligence, for instance. So we have a quite broad range as such. I think in that sense, the way we engage this diversity, be it in the corporate nature or startup nature of the customers, or whether they are more cell ag focused on or fermentation focused, one of the things we try to look at first and foremost is what are their market requirements and what are their process requirements? How sensitive are they, for instance, on topics such as hygienic design? Do we need to look to a very hygienic process or not? So we try to cluster them then into more the requirements that they have as individual companies and individual processes. And I would go as far as saying that there is no copy-paste customer, so to say. There is no customer that's like the other, fundamentally. We are in an industry which is still quite young, quite early stage, and there's still a lot of different approaches. So the way we manage this for us is by definition through a tailored approach. We engage with each and every customer we have on a quite personalized level. So I would say, because we're not an equipment manufacturer as such, I mean, our business is essentially people and working with these teams and acting as their engineering team, essentially. So we engage with them from the start. As early as possible is always best, I say, in that we can really help them shape their scale-up journey before they actually pull the trigger, starting through understanding where they are at today. And that's the key point for us, is understanding what's the customer's starting point. Have they already done some basic considerations about the scaling of their process, or are they still very much on the lab level? Or have they already built a demonstrator that they look to industrialize? These are the key, let's say, points on the timeline we need to define, and the knowledge base we need to characterize before defining what's the next steps where we will support them.
Now, I'm sure you're not going to go into any specifics about customers themselves, but let's talk about that process. Can you walk us through a typical scale-up project from start to finish? Maybe what are some of the key milestones and decision points?
So maybe as a bit of a cheeky note on that, I think for sure there is no typical scale-up projects. That's the one thing I can say. But the key point or the key recommendation for us is start thinking of scale-up as soon as possible with our customers. And we have no fear in engaging with customers that are lab scale, for that matter. However, be very wise about when you trigger your actual scale-up work and you start actually executing such projects. So the way we do this for us, typically, it always starts with this, let's say, this exchange, this staff workshop in defining what has been the customer experience so far, which knowledge have they gathered, and what is their end target? Where are they looking to go and by when? And to deliver which, let's say, which product, which standards for the market, which customer requirements do they need to meet? I would say the ability to answer these questions define already where we start the work from. Based on that, we'll define, do we need to start with the very early stage of setting up a techno-economical assessment for the customers based on their scale-up journey, or revise what they have done in that space maybe? Or are we already having a defined process that can be moved into a first conceptual design? That would be a first milestone, I would say. Once we come to a stage of conceptual design, our customers are able already to get access to first metrics for their project. In particular, if we talk about a new build, that would be then getting access to CapEx estimates, OpEx estimates, timelines. So all these key metrics that they will need to defend their project with their investments or their boards, key stakeholders. And this is normally a gate, I would say, where, of course, it takes time to get funds together, independently whether you want to have a known build or fit yourself into an existing process plant. There is always need for investments. So that's a window then that the customer engages with the market that we can support as well, articulating the requirements of the project. And then beyond that, once this is all ready and in place, we can move, of course, with the basic designs, and beyond this, the execution of the project. So that will then be the point where we trigger procurement and other activities that needs to take place at that stage already to be able to meet the customer's timeline. So that's in a very high level, but yeah.
And does that go as far as go-to-market strategies and commercialization plans? Can ERIDIA assist in that area?
I would say actually that comes first, in a sense. So, I mean, if you go back to what I was mentioning earlier around the TEA work, for us, I would go as far as saying, and maybe that sounds self-defeating, but sometimes we rather slow things down with our customers when we feel that there is not necessarily yet the readiness to trigger bigger scale-up work. We rather go back to the fundamental of, do we have a good TA in place? Are we clear that once this asset is up and running, it will deliver something that will allow you to be economically successful? Because not having that clarity, and not knowing what you don't know as well associated with that, so which unknowns do you still have to resolve, is quite dangerous. And we have seen, of course, unfortunately, many examples of companies scaling too early. That can be quite lethal. So we do engage with a number of companies that are looking to produce TAs. And for us, this is based on a strong process understanding, and also which scale-up assumptions can we make with our customers. This reverse thinking I was mentioning earlier, starting from what is your customer requiring to give you that offtake agreement that you would desperately need to start really building your production and make sure that you have someone to sell to. That's key. That's the essence. Once this is known, based on that, we can really focus on designing the right process at the right scale, and really then based on that, tie in the right capital or the right scale-up strategy, if it's not just building an own asset, that it can actually happen. So that's essential. Mm-hmm. And this is something we support.
Scaling up is obviously challenging. We discuss that all the time in the pages of this magazine, but it's also costly. So as a startup, budgeting is tough. Do you have any general advice for allocating funds during that scale-up process?
Yeah. I think experience for us has shown, and that's also something some of our customers have themselves also openly commented on. Ask for help, and don't be scared to outsource certain tasks. Again and again, we see a lot of companies, in particular startups, are prone to that. They really try to have, let's say, a closed-door approach and try to do as much as they can internally with their own resources, with their own staff. And especially if we talk about the industry, we talk about food industry with novel technology. I mean, here we talk about scaling up new technologies, creating potentially brands for those who want to go B2C, creating supply chains for those who may not have novel ingredients to bring to the market. The challenges are immense. And we still see that companies wait too long until they reach out to bring help and to bring, let's say, third parties that may have had this experience already of scaling. And you save money actually when you do that early on enough, because you can learn a lot from the ecosystem. You can learn a lot from other parties. And that's well allocated fund to bring in third parties to help you on, let's say, outsourcing some of those critical tasks before you bind all your resources to one activity, which could be handled outside, and take away precious time, precious money, which you need to solve critical unknowns that are still holding you back. So that's really one point, I would say.
Economies of scale are also often mentioned, but how they really play out in practice is another matter. Can you explain how ERIDIA can help startups or the companies you're working with achieve those economies of scale?
Mm-hmm. So the way we look at it, of course, I mean, we come from the engineering, particular process engineering background. So we see opportunities in many ways around process design and facility designs that can really, through the right decisions, help companies scale up smarter and scale up cheaper. If you go into, for instance, an own asset or utilizing existing assets, we've mentioned it earlier. The first thing to do before you scale is making sure you have a market for your products and that you understand what that market is expecting from you. And once we have that in hand, we can really focus on going backward into the process design, the downstream process design, which has been very initially, let's say, neglected or taken for granted quite early on, but really is a costly element, in particular in precision fermentation. Downstream process can be quite quite a loss of yield, quite a capital cost attached to it, and operational costs as well. So really optimizing to have as lean a process as possible in the downstream, and then make sure that you design your upstream to deliver the best downstream possible, to have this integrated thinking on your process. So that's a design approach that we really drive with our customers. And then reflecting, how do you integrate this process in which environment? As we said, it can be a known facility, but it can also be existing parks, existing assets that are already present. So there's a lot of opportunities, of course, co-locating. We see many companies looking at this right now, thinking they don't need to generate all the utilities themselves. They can actually co-locate themselves with other players and generate or build on what has already been generated on this site, so that they don't need to do everything by themselves. So these approaches that are a little more hybrid between completely new build and let's say going for pure CMO, this is one of the avenues that we think will certainly help companies who need to go industrial to scale up more economically. But that's just one avenue. Obviously, the key message here for us is optimizing process at scale. This is a first element to drive these economy of scales, and making sure you do this upstream and downstream integrated from the beginning. Not that you end up optimizing only your upstream and realize that you triggered hell in your downstream by doing so, and drive all your costs up. So these are some of the avenues we explore with our customers.
There's probably a bit of overlap with this next question, but given costs and could quickly spiral out of control, what are some of the biggest cost traps in the food tech industry, and how can ERIDIA help avoid those traps?
I mean, maybe it sounds a bit too generic as a statement, but think twice about your scale-up strategy. I think sometimes it's, the whole industry has been pushed to speed and to delivering products to the market and to really going fast. And what we have seen is a lot of companies have scaled very early, or look to scale very early their process, without necessarily having had the chance to go through some key unknowns that needed to be resolved. And that can be really detrimental. That can be lethal, in fact, both because companies may run out of cash and they realize they need to start running R&D parallel to scale up, and both in significant amounts, and that starts to become too much, and eventually investors may not follow anymore. So sometimes it's wise to think twice about your timeline and make sure that you commit yourself to as realistic timeline as possible. So, I mean, I'll go back to what you said earlier. I mean, one of the issue we see is people not asking for a second opinion. It's completely fine to have an ambitious timeline. Just make sure you get someone to look at it and flag any potential risk you have in there, or any potential technical unknown that may hold you back significantly from realizing essentially these plans. And that's best done by really reaching out and finding experts in the space.
We'll discuss some of the other pitfalls of scaling up based on your experience. I mean, many startups struggle with that transition from lab to pilot scale. So what are some of the most common challenges that you see companies facing during that phase?
I mean, there are certainly quite a few. It's not an easy journey to be pioneers in this industry. We've mentioned scaling too early. I think that's genuinely one. And we also see now, I think the industry has learned that not everything requires its own assets. So if you think of going to pilot, I think it's important to have a very strong rationale about, do you need an own pilot? And again, I mean, we are happy to support companies in executing and realizing their own pilots, but sometimes the reflection is the pilot really what you need to raise money for, or should you find alternative ways to validate your results in existing piloting facilities before raising for your first industrial scale? So these transition, I think it's not rushing too fast to the conclusions that you need to raise money to build. I think that's certainly a key one. not looking for external support. I think we've mentioned that earlier. And maybe a third one that's maybe a bit less obvious. I mean, I think people are keen to validate at pilot scale, and that's the natural next, let's say, milestone once you get out of the lab, but not knowing what you need to demonstrate. So it sounds maybe not so obvious, but not having a clear definition of your success. What do you need to actually showcase in a pilot work to be able to unlock your next stage? And that goes back also to what I was mentioning earlier. When you start working at the lab scale on your scale-up journey, reflecting on what is the end, what is the industrial scale you need to meet to be economical in your space, or to get the interest maybe of your customers. What is that scale that you need to get to, and what do you have to learn in between from these piloting stages that you can get to that next scale? So this is a very important element to make sure that independently whether you build a pilot on your own or you use existing pilot facilities, you make sure you get the answers to these questions out of that work and out of that capital you're investing.
Mm-hmm. Naturally, securing funding is often a hurdle for startups. I mean, what advice would you give to companies looking to raise capital to go to that next production level?
Maybe opening an open door, but plan your raise well as much as possible. I mean, obviously, it's really challenging to get cash in, or it's been a very challenging environment. But here again, I think make sure you have that validation of what you're raising and what you're raising it for, both in terms of, let's say, what you're trying to do with the money. Are you raising to, again, I'll build an asset was the typical example, or validate, let's say, a next scale? What kind of timeline are you allocating for this? What kind of commitment are you actually willing to make with your investors? This is all very important because we've seen that the investor community is quite, of course, has become quite sensitized, and is quite challenging now for startups as well. We work with investors on the other side on technical due diligence, so we also see that they are a lot more demanding meanwhile in terms of releasing funding for this industry specifically. So we. I think it's, bring it also third party here again can be valuable to help you, let's say, come across as very credible with your estimates and what you're raising. And it's very valuable actually to have validated external views on the kind of numbers that you're proposing. It also helps the investors feel more secure about where they're heading. The other thing I'm also seeing is maybe not looking just at the VC community, obviously, but also looking at the corporate partners. So I think as startups, many startups can be, of course, very wary of engaging with larger players in industries where they may want to create a market share for themselves. But I think, and that's not just my opinion, that there's a lot of opportunities, and we see more partnership emerging meanwhile between corporates and startups. This is really a great opportunity here for startups to solve several challenges with experienced partner that have already been in the market and can help them sharpen these market definition of their products.
Coming back a little bit, a lot has been said about the importance of cell lines or strain performances to enable economic process at scale. A strong cell line or strain is crucial for success. So I'm interested in understanding how ERIDIA approaches this critical aspect. So how do you guys approach that as part of the customer scale-up?
We certainly have a lot of respect for that. I mean, we're not a strain engineering company ourselves. This is not something we do. However, we know, of course, this has the interplay between strain, performance, and process design is crucial. And we need to, let's say, to consider this in our scale up. So we always say we need to understand, be it from our customers or their partners in strain engineering or cell lines, what are the requirements of their biology? We need to know what their cells like to be in, so to say, and what they can support, what they can stand, so that we can design around that. Now, that's not always easy to say, and this is why we also work in collaboration with strain engineering companies when the projects require it. We have partners there, and we're open to more partnerships in that space to jointly tackle customer projects where strain engineering components is required. Again, to the topic of outsourcing, that can be a very smart way as well for customers to save resources, to outsource that competence to, let's say, specialized players. And we can work with them in defining the kind of, let's say, process interface to these strains will be the most efficient. One way we do this, for instance, is through downscaling exercises. So because we have the experience of scaling up, we can also, let's say, anticipate what kind of conditions cell lines or strains will be exposed to in larger scale systems. And based on that design system and process steps that can allow to mimic this condition and test the behavior of the strains in these conditions. That can be a good way to anticipate how your organisms will behave in a scale-up system ahead of the test at large scale. And again, clarify some of those very critical unknowns, which will eventually affect your economical performances in the end.
I've just got a few questions now, Erika. Fermentation and cell ag hold significant promise for sustainable food production, but while they offer that potential environmental benefit, there are resource implications, particularly around energy and water consumption. So how do you guys address these factors in your scale-up projects? The first thing here is you need to be aware of this. So I think, as you said, it's the first point is defining what are the energy requirements, water requirements, overall resource requirements of your process, and have a transparent view on that. And then we have tools, and also in partnership here with our parent companies, we have access to tools that allow us to drive optimization of process to reduce let's say, these footprints. The question is always, what is the customer end game in that consideration? So are we optimizing first the process and cost performance? And quite often this is still the request, while the environmental footprint is an information that needs to be compared to the incumbents. And that's something we can support through our mass balance and classical, let's say, engineering work. We also, of course, have the option then to reflect on optimizing the process to reduce that footprint in the next instance, and then understanding what are the implications of these adaptations on the costs point of the finished goods resulting from these processes. So that can be a work we can support to drive these COGS estimates based on different processing strategies in link to different footprints, essentially. First point is awareness, then it's a business decision that needs to be made as well, and let's say a sustainability assessment that the company needs to make, how they can onboard these customers. And it's not just the product itself. Obviously, you have to consider the environmental impact of the raw materials, the waste generation, transportation. Right, I've just got one final question for you, Erika. How do you think fermentation and cell ag will fundamentally change the way we produce and consume food?
I mean, I'm obviously a big believer. I wouldn't be in this industry otherwise. I think it has. I mean, these technologies have already done so much for other industries in how we produce other categories of goods. If you think also from the sense of the pharmaceutical sector, and I'm certain that they will play a critical role on the global scale to enable eventually more sustainable productions, but also solve other issues of local food production, food security challenges, and so on and so forth. Long way to go to make it a scalable setup, but really a high potential setting.
Definitely exciting. Well, look, Erika, thank you very much for your time. I'm looking forward to meeting you once again in 8 weeks at the Future of Protein Production in Amsterdam. Are you speaking there?
Yes, I look forward to it.
Yes, excellent. Well, I shall be there in the front row. All right, Erika, awesome. Nice to speak to you. Take care.
Bye-bye.